Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I'm the host of this show. And, for those of you who are new to this program and haven't checked out any of our archives, I always recommend you go and check them out because we've got some great interviews with smart CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs, companies ranging from Netflix to Kinko's, YPO, EO, Activision Blizzard, Lending Tree. We did Redfin the other day, all kinds of great interviews in the archives. And of course, this episode brought to you by Rise 25, which helps B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. And you can learn all about some of our different strategies and ideas at rise25.com. And my guest here today is Paul Bresenden. He is the president and founder of 454 Creative, which is a marketing agency based out of Orange County, California. Focuses on designing marketing strategy for mid-market firms with a focus on credit unions and higher education. And he's also the managing partner for KidCEOs. It's an entrepreneurial startup for kids. And he's also a board member with Entrepreneurs Organization, EO, which is how we connected. And so we're going to talk a little bit about his background, his story, how he got into entrepreneurship. He's the seventh of 9 children, Russian immigrants who came over to the United States with literally nothing. So just an amazing story. I'm really excited to get into it. And Paul, we were chatting beforehand, and I love to ask people about how entrepreneurial they were as a kid, whether they're doing lemonade stands or things like that. I'm in a period right now where my 12-year-old is really into doing that. We've done a couple of different lemonade stands or coffee stands or things like that because it's winter right now. And he just he lights up when he does that. And you said, not only did I have paper route, I had like 3 or 4 paper routes at a time. So how did you do that?
Well, my older siblings, I'm number 7 out of 9 kids. They started in the paper route, business. So they were a little bit older and kind of carried it through. So when I was old enough to do it, and I remember junior high, getting up at 5:30 or 6 in the morning and folding all your papers and stuffing them into plastic bags if it was raining and loading them all up to the side of your handlebars and coming back. And so, that was started with the paper route, added to the second paper route, started to make some, decent money for a, elementary school, junior high kid. Started recruiting my younger brother to help or some friends to help. So we just started adding. And at some point, I think as kids, I had the most paper routes of anybody that was employed by the newspaper. They would have like once or twice a year competitions of who could throw the paper the furthest or the most accurate. And we would always win those. Perfect, right? I mean, so they're sort of responsible on how many routes you get. So when they get desperate and you're good, they'll give you whatever you want. They're all sort of connected and tied to each other. So we did paper routes. We did lots of stuff. We're very resourceful when you're poor and, 7 of 9 kids, you kind of have to figure out how to entertain yourself. And my parents didn't have much money raising us. So we would make our own toys, make our own stuff, fix cars or bikes or whatever we wanted to do.
I'm super impressed that you said that you hired your friends and hired your younger brothers, because that's a key distinction. Because when I ask now, current entrepreneurs about their childhood, there's an interesting divide between the ones that did it themselves. And of course, what do you expect, right? They're 8, 9, 10 years old. Like they don't know anything about delegation usually at that age, but some do. And some learn that lesson really well. And I think it's, it usually is a sign of an entrepreneur who's got it together. Because if you can learn that lesson at 7, 8, 9 years old, that by the time you're older, you don't need to struggle with it like I did, right? Like when I started my own business, it took a while to learn that lesson. Right.
I mean, that's sort of the entrepreneur's dilemma, right? You're good at something, and so you think I can just do this thing and make more money at it. And that's that's the E-myth, right? Yeah. If I just do this, I'll be better at it, versus the people that are thinking, okay, how do I actually improve or change this process?
Yeah.
And so that might be somebody else doing it and me kind of putting together a process. I struggle with that in every business I do. It's, there are some people that are just pure process people. I love the work, right? But I love kind of inventing a better mousetrap for the work too. So I'm kind of in the straddling both sides of it problem.
What was some of the highs and lows of having so many siblings running in a household, growing up in a household like that with so many kids running around?
Your content, what's the phrase, right? Fish don't know that the water they're swimming in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we didn't realize we grew up poor. We just thought this is how life was. We didn't realize that as immigrants, I think a lot of my success as running a marketing agency is what I would call the immigrant gift for me in growing up is you step into somebody else's world and you quickly have to adjust and learn their context as opposed to yours. So you're always thinking that you're sort of this outsider trying to understand their perspective and how do I fit in, or how do I see it from their shoes? How do I get them to see it? How do I present it in a way that it seems like it's their way?
Mm-hmm.
So I remember, elementary school, I would fail the standardized tests all the time. Like Captain Hook was A, and I didn't know who Captain Hook was. B, I didn't know what a pirate was. That was none of my, cultural vernacular. And so you learn to adapt and learn quickly, and gladly, I think they're fixing all of that stuff or have fixed all of that stuff in standardized tests so that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
But it forces you to learn quicker. It forces you to, understand what other people are knowing and how they're viewing the world and the lens that they're putting on. And so that to me is a gift even now, right? When I step into an engagement where I'm trying to sell something for a client, market a specific service, to view it from the audience's perspective rather than the organization's perspective. And when you hire an agency, that's really what you're paying for usually is objectivity, being able to see something from a messaging perspective or a design perspective or some sort of usability perspective to frame it in a way that makes sense to the end audience. Yeah, I mean, that was sort of the learning all through. Like I can kind of name moments in every stage of life, like, oh, that was a big aha. Oh, that was.
Yeah. Or like I look at my son now with the lessons that I'm trying to impart on him with, independence. The first lemonade stand that we did, I said to him, like, you're going to have to borrow money from me in order to get this started because you don't have money to do it. So I'm going to lend you $40 and you can use that. And we actually sold coffee from Starbucks. We went and bought buckets of coffee from Starbucks. And when we sold it, and at the end of the day, after he gathered all the money, then we took the expenses, said, you pay back my loan, you pay me back. And now look at all this money you have. Now you're not dependent on me anymore. And it sounds like you learned that as a young kid because you have eight other siblings. Oh, and man. So you learned that in order to generate my own money, I need to go out and make something, which is a really powerful lesson because then now, you can, no matter what happens to you, you can do something to take care of yourself.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, totally. Your story though reminds me, like, for me, a lot of that was just necessity, right? Like, if you wanted money, you had to go earn it. And I think to my kids now, they don't have a need for anything, right? Like, and that's something that as entrepreneurs or as people that are a little bit more successful, it's more of a struggle to teach our kids financial literacy and independence because we learned it through hardship usually. And we want to retain that sort of grittiness to people's lives and so you have to invent that constraint for your kids. I remember in, I don't know, 4th, 5th grade, I would ride my bike with my little brother to school, which was a far distance, maybe 3 miles. I don't know. My wife would never let my kids ride to school. That sort of thing. But we would stop at a donut store and we would buy donuts and sell them at school. And so that would be like, then it was always something, right? The snack shack wouldn't sell soda. So we would buy Cokes and put them in our locker and sell Cokes for, so there was always that sort of angle of how do I make money? I don't even know where that came from. It just kind of was the natural outcome. Maybe that was me and not every kid, but I think you want that to be entrepreneurial. But part of the goal is seeing the gap in what's out there and how do I step into that.
The school does not have a soda machine. Kids like soda. I go buy soda, bring it there, and I sell it. Yeah, which is something else my son's been doing. He's been bringing bars of candy and then going around selling to other kids. I'm so proud of him. Anyways, so you graduated from high school and you obviously had to pay your way through college, and you also started designing websites and building computer networks and things like that. Talk about how you ended up. Were you always interested in computers?
Yes, actually. I mean, we got a computer at home, what was that? 386 and the 486, and I built our 486. And gratefully, I don't know where my parents got the money for a computer, but that we did have a computer growing up, and I was always sort of interested in that. In high school, we went to a great church, and there was a lot of like media and professionals that were there that were sort of volunteering and running the sound system at the church or lighting and video. Like the guy that I learned video at church now runs all those like big remote trucks for the NFL. And so I learned the guy, one of my mentors, and at that stage, just jumping in and doing audio video stuff at church. They had a big, orchestra and choir and band and all that other stuff. And so I would get up early at 6:30 or 7 on a Sunday morning and go set up 30 or 40 microphones and wire it all in and run the soundboard. And at some point we replaced the slide projector with actual video screens. And this is like back in the day where they're, I don't know,
not easy to do.
Not easy to do. Projectors were 3,000 ANSI, 3,000 lumens for a $10,000 or $15,000 projector. And the thing was the size of an engine block. It was massive. And so we would have to build out these shrouds. You learned how to be a lot more innovative. It was a lot of work back then to do all that stuff. And so, I learned to be relatively technical and learn the technical aspects of all of that stuff back then.
And did you manage, you were running you were kind of designing websites for individuals or for companies and then using that to pay for your school?
Well, I did. Yeah. So that was how I had to put myself through college, right? Like my parents didn't have money for that. So and that was the same for all of my siblings that wanted to go to school. Like some did, some didn't, most did. And so I started building computer networks, right? The church didn't have a computer network. And so I built them a computer network and a server, and they didn't have a website. No one had websites back then. It was like they were Flash websites that had the most click button on the internet was the skip here Flash intro button. And so we started like trying to figure out, okay, which, my church needs a website. No one else has one. Let's build one. And it's like, what does this website do? And then 4 people at the church say, hey, I need a website. And you start kind of walking through that. And, then you start building websites for businesses. And then you start learning the lead gen model. I have tap my network. Like, let's go out and find other people to build businesses for. How do I expand my network? And by the time I put myself through school, I finished graduating. I had worked at the church at that point as a youth pastor for a while, and I was graduating, and I had to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And I put out, 200, 300 resumes. And I think this is 2003. The economy just kind of took a dump. .com bubble had crashed. And so I'm like getting job offers for $10, $12 an hour, and I'm already billing at $45 an hour, building my own stuff. I thought, I'm going to take a pay cut to go work full time for someone when I can work with my existing clients that work a quarter of the time and make more money.
Yeah.
So that's where I started the company in my parents' attic. The next day, I hired another employee on day 2, hired my 3rd employee the next week, and just started going from there. And so we were doing IT and web development. We ended up transitioning to just doing web development, dropping the IT stuff because I was the only one that could do the IT stuff. But, I hired a high school kid that I was in my church small group and taught him how to do web development. So he started, and he owns a web development firm now, and we still subcontract out a bunch of work to him. He's an amazing guy. But that's how that all started, is you just kind of start picking down and start leaning into what's working. And we quickly moved from being a web development shop because we realized that people were coming to us wanting to build something that we knew wouldn't work. And I didn't want to hang my integrity on, hey, we're going to build this website, and then you're going to be really mad at me when it doesn't deliver the outcome that you're looking for. So instead of me
like leads, they wanted clients, that sort of thing. And so it wasn't ultimately serving the end goal that they wanted.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, every project wants more revenue at the other end of it. Most of them have no idea how that website connects to more revenue. And so as you start picking apart that process, you realize it's not just this one. At that point, websites were the shiny object, right? If I just have a website, more clients would come to me. The shiny objects change for business owners like now every day. It went from websites.
If I just had a TikTok channel, then I would have more revenue.
Yeah. And it was, let's build out these custom, and this was the aha moment for me, is we started doing Facebook app development where we were building out these Facebook business pages. And at that point, they were really highly customizable. We had this very fancy skinning option that went in and sold product and did all of this stuff. And we had just launched this fairly large one for Beyond Meat. And this is Beyond Meat way back then. I should have just done that one stock. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I know, right?
We built that one for Beyond Meat. And literally the next week, Facebook shut off that whole platform and said, no, you have to use the standardized Facebook, so all that custom functionality we had built. And they didn't blame me, but I carried this high degree of guilt of like, shouldn't we have seen this coming? I couldn't. I realized that all of this stuff that we view as being owned, right? We view our web presence as something we own, our SEO ranking as something we own, our social following. We built all of those fans. We own that. None of those are owned. Those are all rented. It's not our platform. We don't control the algorithm. We don't control the audience. We don't control the reach. You have to view that as something that you rent and you play their game, and they get to change the rules whenever they want. And so that really was this aha moment for me is, okay, how do we get down to solving people's problems in a way that they have the most degree of control that is as flexible as possible? So that started changing. Hey, it's more important to start selling strategy rather than selling development work. Is
that the point at which you decided that I'm going to basically rebrand the company, started anew, and say this is our new focus? Did you feel like you had to kind of put your foot in it and plant your flag, so to speak, and say like, we're not this anymore, we're a marketing agency now?
I never really had a definitive moment of like, we're not a web development agency, we're a marketing agency now. Like at some point you just say, this is what we're selling now.
Yeah.
And so there was like a lot of aha moments in that process. Like, hey, we're no longer pitching for websites. I'm not going to sell you a proposal for this big website without understanding strategically how to get you from point A to point B. And usually you don't know how to define that, so I'm going to charge you for that. So the first thing, like to me, one of the big shifts there was, hey, we're going to charge up front for a website roadmap. And we're going to lay out exactly what you need and how you're going to get there. That's independent of the development work that we're going to do for you. And so that was a huge shift for us. And that was one of the big shifts of moving into, right, charging for strategy, charging for creative thinking. And there's a lot of firms that do that now.
Well, we do something similar with our company as well. And it's critical. I mean, I'd say to every other company that's out there, especially in the B2B space, you should have some kind of like road mapping process or something like that, so you can at least try out whether you're a good fit to work together in an ongoing capacity with another company. Right. And if you don't know how to get to the end, right, like that, and if you haven't defined what the end is, and it's some loose, fuzzy thing that's sitting out there, there is the chance of that project being completely derailed. And it's not a remote chance. It's pretty darn high. Yeah. You get to the end of it and you push ready to launch. And there was a lot more of those back before we did this process than there is now. There's still one or two that squeak by a year that you're like, oh my gosh, you guys invested so much and you didn't follow the process. And so your CEO got to the end and derailed it by saying, nope, we're not doing this. Or your marketing manager didn't do their process. And now everybody else says, yeah, this isn't what we wanted at the end of it. And it doesn't launch. And that's so rare that it happens now. I don't know. We probably do 30 decent projects of size that are like that. And it's maybe one that doesn't go live. But that's what I would categorize as waste. The role of lean marketing for me, and that's sort of one of our tenets for our team, is we actively look to minimize waste. And one of those things is you spend a bunch of time doing stuff that doesn't actually hit the market, hit the public space. And so if you do your marketing and you do your stuff and we deliver all of this creative to you, we deliver this campaign to you, and you don't push go, that's all waste. Right? It never got the chance to do the work that it was supposed to do, which is generate more revenue for your firm. Yeah. What have some of the challenges been for you? It sounds like, I don't know, other than the paper route, have you had a job? Had a lot of jobs. I've worked as a janitor in our church. I've worked as since college. Have you had a job? Since college. No, I've only done 454 since college. Yeah. My business partner, Jeremy's like that. I think his last job really was some point in college, maybe. Yeah. Yeah. At some point, you're just like, I'm all into what I'm doing. I make way more money for myself and for my clients doing what I do. I have this conversation a lot, especially with like nonprofits, is I wish I had more money to give away, and I give away a fair amount. I mean, we're all pretty blessed and have tons of more than we need. But there's so much more that I generate, even for the nonprofits we serve, by jumping in on their board and helping them figure out how to grow or achieve their objectives, and like, massive growth potential. But a lot of times it's just as important to give our expertise. It's probably more important to give the expertise of the things that we're uniquely gifted at than it is just to write a check and walk away. Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's something that society needs, right? People like us that are entrepreneurial, ambitious, have honed our particular expertise or our craft, that can step into an organization and say, hey, let me help you transform these things that you're stuck at.
And that's one of the things that you've done with Entrepreneurs Organization. So when did you get involved with the EO? How long have you been a member of EO?
I think this is my pushing 3.5 years now.
Okay. What were you, so after so many years of entrepreneurship, what brought you to joining a community for entrepreneurs?
I've been in several others, right? I've been in, I don't know.
Vistage, maybe. Yeah.
I was in a couple of groups, and then my kids are young, they're little. And at some point my wife said, hey, you're in too many of these groups, just kind of start dialing it back. And to be honest, I got involved in some of the other ones. Like I was in a Christian CEO peer group, and it was great, but most of the guys were significantly older than me. They're sort of at the tail end of their career, kind of talking about how to transition out or sell. And I kind of liked that group, and it was fancy, and we would meet at the, super fancy resort.
Sounds fun.
It was fun. It was, staring at the ocean on the world's, California's most beautiful golf course.
That's not so bad.
Not so bad. It's a great life.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking like, shoot, like this isn't really driving what I'm looking for. And I got invited to speak at a couple of EO groups. And, they would bring me in to talk about marketing or talk about where the market's headed or, whatever. So I'd give my 15, 20-minute pitch, and I was thinking, shoot, I suddenly as I was getting invited into those, I realized, oh my goodness, there's like 20, 30% of our client set are EO members. Like I should just join EO and go speak around to these groups, and I'll use this for lead gen. This is the new easy ticket. And so I joined EO, and then I realized, there's the non-solicitation clause. That's like,
this is worse, damn it.
And then I realized I really like this. I actually like this more than the other stuff I was doing. So I was like, well, maybe I'll go speak there, and I'll just enjoy this one to be my group. And my wife was like, hey, you need to cut, like you can do one of these groups, pick whichever one you're going to do. And so I got rid of all the rest. I stuck with EO.
Yeah.
And then very quickly, I think Orange County's sort of marketing numbers. Orange County had this attrition problem where we were losing more members than we were gaining. And I didn't really realize that, but one of our clients was the president that year. And so he asked me to join the board because he knew what I did. And he's like, our number one priority is to solve this sort of attrition problem. And so we had two objectives: new EO members. And so the goal was to add 25 new members to a chapter that was roughly 80. And then to keep our retention above 92%, which would have meant, then we would have been net positive. I think we would have added 15 to 20 members at that point, which would have been more than the chapters ever added. And so that was, a pretty ambitious goal, considering the last 3 years had like continually shed
negative numbers.
And I didn't even know that. I don't think anybody actually knew that until I pulled the numbers for, like, normally what I do for a process like this is I write the case study before we start. I'd say, here's what we're going to do. Here's the problem set. And as I started pulling the data, I'm like, holy cow, this is a serious issue. So what's been done before? And previous people had done stuff, right? The guy that was the chair before me was a social media guru, and it's not like he didn't produce leads. He produces a ton of leads for the problem. Membership just couldn't convert them. Now you're going to have, this is what always happens in organizations. You have finger pointing that starts to happen, right? Like you're not contacting these leads in time. These aren't quality leads, and it becomes this ever sort of shifting cycle. And that's one of the things that like I work to solve before we start, right? Like whose responsibility is it? What's the SLA agreement? What's the handoff in an EO context between a marketing role, an external marketing role, and the membership role? And so there's a bunch of process that we went in to solve that. And it was a fun sort of challenge, right? We did a bunch of innovation that I love in EO. Working with other CEOs is like herding cats. They also have limited time on a volunteer basis, but we all sort of have these high degree of like responsibility. Well, I guess everybody's degree of responsibility is varied in EO. Right? Like, there are plenty of people that make decisions and don't execute. So you got to find the ones that do. But I was really fortunate in terms of working with our marketing chair and finding some really great stuff. We ended up blowing through that 25 number. I think we brought in 32 that year.
Wow.
Solved the retention problem. We had the highest retention, I think, in our region. And so,
what is one or two things that you did that you think helped achieve those results?
I had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder in that I wanted to prove that we could do this without spending a penny. And so no ads, All we did was, and I, borrowed one of another EO member's Zoom info credits. We built a lead list out of Zoom info of all the entrepreneurs in Orange County that qualified. We tightened up the criteria a bit. Instead of doing 1 million, I think we did 2 to 14 million, because that roughly built us a list of, I don't know, 4,000 or 5,000 in Orange County. And then the only thing I did the first year was email sequences. I would send out a monthly email that would invite them to a predefined happy hour. Before that, membership would meet with each prospect individually. We'd try to qualify them. So we would pass along a lead, and it would take the membership team. They would round robin assign it out. And by the time the person got a phone call, it was a week, 2, if we were lucky later. So what I cheated was I would send the email, and the minute that somebody responded and said, yeah, I'm interested, I would just say, great, what's your cell phone number? I'd love to have a call with you right now. And so I would respond within 2 or 3 minutes. So I would block my afternoon whenever I sent that email, and I would have a work block for something else, and an email would come through, and I would spend 15 or 20 minutes and say, this is what EO is about. This is what's unique about us, right? We're a nonprofit. This is sort of our format. I think it'd be really, if that sounds interesting to you, right? A high degree of commitment. It's different than Vistage. It's different than Provisors in these ways. If you're interested, join me for happy hour. I'd love to buy you a beer. And so then we would have 10 prospects, 8 to 10 prospects every month show at a happy hour, and I would facilitate the handoff to membership. So what it did is it provided a human relational connection. And this works in a business context too. Don't send a proposal without a human.
Absolutely, right? Yeah, there needs to be a person.
And it has to have a person that's bought into the product.
Yeah.
So what better to sell the value of EO than the CEO that's already committing his time and energy both to the process, to being in an EO forum, but also like sold off to be on the board, right? Like this sort of access, if you want that sort of sales engagement from me as a consultant or a fractional CMO, I bill lawyer rates for that, right? But to do it in this context is a different, it shows that it has value and people get that.
Yeah. And you care about it too. I mean, you care about what you've gotten out of it and for helping other entrepreneurs as well.
Now it's not a sales pitch from a coach that's responsible for his forum that's getting paid off of that. It's a bunch of business owners that say, no, this really has impacted my personal life, my business life. Like you should check this out.
So speaking of other things that are meaningful to you, you mentioned you have 3 young kids and you want to teach them about financial literacy. And you read a book called Die with Zero, which is on my list. I need to read it. Which really inspired you to start another endeavor that you're working on right now called KidCEOs. Tell us about that.
Well, entrepreneurs, a little ADD, have lots of ideas.
Of course.
So
it's been 6 months without a new initiative. You need a new initiative.
So here's what I've learned with my initiatives is give them away for free because I don't have time to do them. So I will actively pitch ideas to college students or other people and say, hey, I'll help you get this thing launched. Go do this great idea because I don't have time for it. This is one that I had sat on for 2 or 3 years that I thought, okay, this is a really good one. And then I went to an EO event with Keith. If you haven't done the Oak Journal, it's another fabulous one. But it was kind of this pitch of like, hey, what do you want to do in this quarter? What are you doing this year? And so I had one that was like, I really want to connect with my wife. Right? I really want her to feel loved in the ways that she wants to feel loved. I really, and then I had some, other personal goals. I want personal health. I feel like I was running ragged. And so I wanted time for me to surf and have a creative day and have some time to kind of recharge and spend time with God and, all those other sorts of things that go with it. My other goal was I've been sitting on this idea for way too long. I want to set my kids up for financial literacy, for success, because it's one thing for me to kind of go through all the adversity that I went through to be an entrepreneur. How do I, minus that adversity for my kids growing up, how do I teach them to be entrepreneurial? How do I teach them to be kind of scrappy and financially wise but not be greedy, right? To teach
or
them
not having to go through the hardship you went through.
Right. The necessity is the mother of most invention, right? And you take away the necessity and you're like, how are my kids going to do this?
Right.
So that was sort of the endeavor. And Die with Zero had this really great perspective of give your kids the money when they need it. Don't wait for when you're dead to like give them this chunk of money because it doesn't normally turn out great. You're giving it to them way too late. The average age of a distribution of an inheritance is 62. They've already gone through all the parts of life when they needed the money. So,
but the flip side of that is if you just give it to them without any financial literacy, they're probably going to squander it or not appreciate it.
So yeah, and the other big point of the book was aim to die with zero in your bank account, which is a fascinating, like we could start hours of conversation over whether you agree or disagree with that philosophy. Mm-hmm. But I thought, what a beautiful, liberating concept to me if I could set my kids up before they were 18 and they were wise with their money, that they could retire potentially wealthier than I will. And if I could set them up for that success before they left the house. And so that was the idea of KidCEOs. It's a tax vehicle, right? Parents pay into this piece. They sign up their kids for a membership, and I'll guarantee you that they will get at least $6,000 to invest in their Roth IRA, so that if they didn't put any more money in it after 18, they'd still end up with roughly $2 million when they retired. If they keep doing it, it'll be anywhere between $8 and $20 million, depending on how the market performs. It's huge, right? I couldn't save that amount of money to give to my kids when I die. But if I did this small work now, this is meaningful, big stuff. And so now we're developing the curriculum around, okay, how do I teach this kid to be financially smart? So we're talking about things like, okay, what is a budget? What do you do with your money when you get it? How do you cultivate generosity? How do you budget for savings? And primarily the vehicle right now in this early stages is at least get them to fully fund a Roth IRA. And you can do this when the kid is old enough to create artwork. So KidCEOs buys their artwork from them from a licensing fee, pays them the fee. They can now take that money, turn around, put it all into a Roth IRA. But we're going to start doing more like curriculum and kind of like meetups and that kind of stuff to teach them how to be entrepreneurial and start lemonade stands, paper routes, photo booth business. There's so many people in EO that do amazing stuff like this. There's a guy in LA doing a Z-tag system, which is basically laser tag without guns. Parent wanted to invest in that process and, give their kid a loan the same way that you did for your kids for a lemonade stand, right? And teach them how to do that and pay back that loan. It's a great one. There's a photo booth guy that I would love to start a business with my.
So rather than taking that money and putting it into like the stock market or an index fund or something like that, investing it in a business.
Oh, for your kid or for the kid to do that? What are you saying there?
Well, is that what you're saying the model is, or that's what you're proposing for the parents?
I think those are two different things to teach. At some point, I think the parent, if you could teach your kid how to play the stock market, great. But that's a different game. I think it's important. For my kids, I would rather have my kids learn how to be entrepreneurial, how to see opportunity and gaps where it exists, and then how to be financially wise, where to take risk, right? How to manage that appropriate risk, and then how to be wise with your money. Because regardless if you end up working for somebody else or starting your own business, if you can understand how to manage risk appropriately and how to exploit opportunity, right? The sky's the limit. You could do anything you want.
Yeah, for sure. One thing I'm a little confused about in the model is you said that one of the problems is that this generational wealth that changes hands tends to happen way later in life. And if you're setting up a Roth for your kids, wouldn't the kids still be getting that way later in life? And they're not benefiting from it when they're younger, right?
Well, part of this is to teach them to earn money. And then what do you do with your money? So if we can put 10 years, $60,000 worth of funds into a Roth IRA, and that's their first part of their savings vehicle, right? The question is, what do you do with your money and where is it most valuable? So yeah, we could spend $60,000 when they're 16 and buy them a really, really nice BMW, right? And that may get them, some extra dates and way too much fun in high school. Or you could take that money and teach them how to be wise with that money and put that and delay that gratification and say, if you don't touch this money until you retire, right? That's $2 million that you can retire with. If you keep funding that for $6,000 a year, which is, think about how much we're having to stock away into our retirement plans now because we didn't learn that when we were kids. Yeah. Our parents didn't know any better. My parents, even if they knew better, couldn't afford that. Right? But this is a gift that I can give my kid that will set them up to be, in the tens or 20s of millions, right? With minimal effort now. Now, that doesn't mean that that's all the money that they'll earn. There's plenty of other businesses that we can start and say, okay, now what do you do with this other element of it? Right? I
love that you're taking this on financial literacy for kids and families and helping to tackle that, because that's such an important lesson. I know we're about out of time, so I want to wrap things up with the question I always ask, which is my gratitude question. I'm a big fan of expressing gratitude to those who helped you along the way. I know you're grateful to a lot of people. Who would you want to acknowledge for helping you?
Oh, this is good. There are probably, so I'll just pick one because there are like 10 that I could mention here just off of the top of my head. I think when you had mentioned this earlier, there was not a hesitation in my mind of like, oh, these are the people. There's a lot of people, but I'll pick Randy Sapp. He was my mentor in high school and college. He worked at the church that I worked at, and he taught me everything about audio recording. And to be honest, there's so many different ventures that he pushed me out on to where he did the selling and all I did was the fulfillment and reap the reward of the profit from all of that. And so like from a technical perspective, I think he set me up from an entrepreneurial perspective more than anybody, right? I learned to be scrappy. I learned to execute at a professional level in ways that like, I don't know, most other people didn't. I got to see what, recording with $4,000 microphone sounds like versus a $50 microphone. I got to go out and do it with him as opposed to just trying to invent my way. And it really helped me set up the beginning parts of my, entrepreneurial journey. It's
great.
funny to watch that in a church context because
not usually the place you'd think that
No.
there's, entrepreneurship.
Yeah, but I got access to people that operated at a professional level that I wouldn't have otherwise gotten access to. And they willingly poured their lives into a junior high school kid and drove me around and did all of that stuff. I mean, I went to Sri Lanka with him and installed, a sound system, audio video lighting into a 5,000 seat auditorium there. And we were always like the latest technology, like JBL donated all the equipment, all of this cool stuff. Like the experiences that I got through Randy, I don't think I've ever, I don't know. It was a gift in and of itself. That's all I would say.
Yeah. Paul, this has been great. Where can people go to learn more about 454 Creative and also KidCEOs and anywhere else to connect with you?
You can connect with me on LinkedIn, P. Bresenden, P-B-R-E-S-E-N-D-E-N. My 454 Creative is 454creative.com. And then KidCEOs is kidceos.org. But yeah, should be easy to find.
All right, Paul. Thanks so much.
Thanks, John.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution.
Revolution.
And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.